learn and be inspired by. So go look that up and check it out if you're interested. Tonight is a free event, so you don't even have to pay for tonight's event. It's a spoken word open mic night, but also featuring some of Austin's best spoken word artists. So that is a really cool event. Go look at their website.
Wow. Wanted to also mention that this coming Friday, Naomi and Deborah Jordan have set up a youth game night, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Jordan's home. If you would make a comment
Ooh.
right now, or you can reach out to Naomi or me, and we can provide those details.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, that's going to be really fun. So reach out to us if you have a youth aged kid. I believe that it's ages 10 to what, 13, 14 or
Yeah.
something, that can participate in that game night. So speaking of things happening next weekend, we have Soul Hour, which is basically us bringing back a version of Sunday school that is going to be nourishing for your soul. We are so excited to create this space. We've had such a great turnout. We're going to be doing this every Sunday that we meet in person for the first hour. It begins at 8:45. There's coffee. Occasionally, a kind soul brings a donut. And every week, we'll hear from a different person in our community who has something to share, a donut or 30. But yeah, did you want to say something, Matt?
No, you said a donut, so I was like,
Oh,
just one.
a donut. Yeah, just one, and we all share for our first hour communion. No, so like we've had some really incredible conversations in this space, and on 9/25 next Sunday, Noel and Forrest, who are part of our community, are going to be highlighting a workshop that they're leading this fall. The workshop is 6 weeks long, and it is about emotional intimacy and reclaiming meaningful connection. And y'all, I've heard them speak about this. It is so incredible. Come to Soul Hour next Sunday to hear kind of like a miniature version of what they're going to be talking about later on in the fall. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, same. I'm really looking forward to that as well. And then next week also is our youth-led service, our kid-led service. We're really excited about this. We do this each year. We started several years ago. It's such an amazing opportunity for the younger members of our community to be front and center and lead us. So they have been working literally for months, pulling this together, and we're really excited. Anything else to say about that, Aurelia? No? Okay. Well, Aurelia is going to chime for us next to mark this sacred time together that we have.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. And I am removing some people from the stream. I'm doing a little bit of double duties today and doing the tech stream. So if things don't feel very smooth, it's because I'm multitasking. But I'm so excited to chime this morning because I wanted to share with you all a little prayer that I have been saying every day, several times a day. So many of you know that I'm kind of obsessed with Brother Lawrence right now and his book from forever ago called Practice of the Presence. Oh, actually, I have it right here. This is a new translation that uses inclusive language for God, and it's a beautiful translation, and I've been reading it, and I talked about it at Soul Hours a few weeks ago, but I'm just loving how grounded it's making me right now, just going back to this kind of what I call like a mystic's heart posture. And I found this prayer in the book. I actually have it right here. I can see it on my wall looking straight up through my computer. And I read it before I sit down to do any work whatsoever. And it has been such a gift to me. So I'm going to share it with you now, and then I will chime 10 times. And this is a little bit spontaneous. I didn't plan on sharing it. So if you want the text, let me know and I'll type it up and send it over to you later. But just let me know. Okay, here's the prayer, y'all. My God, since you are with me and since you ask me to apply my mind to these external duties, I beg you, give me the grace to remain with you and keep you company. But so my results will be better, my friend. Work with me, accept my actions, and occupy all my affections. Amen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Konovoski. If you've got your children nearby and they're maybe finishing breakfast or looking at their devices or something, you might invite them to come and gather around for a little bit. I'm just want to introduce myself also to start by thanking Naomi for inviting me to do the kids service today. This is my second time to get to do it. I'm also Deacon David Stippick's mom, and then Hillary, my daughter-in-law, and Riker and Harper and Carly are my grandchildren. So some of y'all know them, and I get the privilege of being with them often. And in fact, they're all the ones that invited me to Peace of Christ, which I'm eternally grateful for at this time in my life. Which, as you can tell, I'm a little older than a lot of people at the church, but there's a lot of us that are in our older years, and we're really enjoying it. I also want to start by saying that, guess what? I feel nervous. Did you know that even adults and even your deacons and your preachers, we all kind of feel nervous. It's normal. But then once we get started about what we have planned and what we want to say, and I always say a little prayer, it starts rolling with what the message I would like y'all to have today. So anyway, enough about me and what I'm here for, but I want to talk to you about, Naomi told me y'all have been learning about how you can grow and learn from your mistakes. And we all make them, whether we're children or young adults or the age of a lot of your parents now, our grandparents. We make mistakes every day. And we don't have to say, oh, what a horrible person I am. We can say, oh, I made a mistake, and learn from it. And so I also want to tell you that I started reading a book by our pastor. I'm only in the first chapter, but it's called A Brown Girl's Epiphany. Aurelia she just came out with this book this week, so I just now got it. But just from the first chapter, it talked a lot about a voice that we have inside of us, and it's called intuition. It's just something that we know inside. I didn't tell you the name of her book. Her book is A Brown Girl's Epiphany. And epiphany is also a word you may not know the meaning of, but it's called discovery, trying to reveal something. And she says in her book that she truly believes that children, that's all of you, naturally have this intuition inside of them. It's a divine gift. We're born with it. In fact, as I read further in her book, I bet that intuition, that voice that we hear her talk about often and always, is Imago Dei. And that's the image of God that is within us. And so now I'm going to tell you a story about me. When I was a little girl about this age, does that look like me? That's me. And I had 5 siblings. These are my siblings. These are my 2 sisters and my 3 brothers. And I had very long hair. I could sit on my hair when I was a little girl. Anyways, that was me as a little girl. And this is a story about something that I did, not something that really happened to me, but something that I did. And many things I've done in my past that I've been not happy about or realized I could have done differently. But this one stuck with me. Okay, so I was with a friend, my best friend next door, and we were playing, and I had chewing gum in my mouth. And for some reason that I don't remember, because it was a long time ago, I thought it would be a good idea to put this gum in my friend's hair. And she probably had hair about as long as mine, maybe down to her middle of her back. And it was a big piece of gum. And then I realized almost as soon as I did it, oh, that wasn't such a good idea. And then, I'm probably going to get in big trouble, because we could not get that gum out. I tried, and it got worse and worse. And her whole hair was all gummed up like this. And we were outside in her backyard, so we couldn't go in to get the scissors. That's what I thought. We need to cut this gum out. So we looked around in their garage and found some big, long, they were long, garden shears. I don't know if you know what they are, but they're to cut the bushes with. They're big, big scissors. And that's what I cut that gum out with, so that when we were done, her hair looked more like this, and with none of this on the side. And I was like, oh no, I was so scared, and I was so embarrassed, because I knew we're going to have to tell our parents. And so we did. And I was very relieved when her parents were not upset at me at all. They just told us that we should have come to them, and that they could have gotten it out without having to cut it out, but they would get her a nice haircut, and everything was good with them. And then we had to go to my house and tell my parents. And I was mortified. I was crying. I was so sorry for what I had done. And my dad looked at me. He was kind of the one that gave out the consequences. And I had some. I just don't remember what they were. This is what I remember. That he also wanted to console me, because I was so upset. And he said, "You are not your mistakes." And he told me and showed me that he loved me even when I was wrong, and that he knew I had learned a lesson. So what I remember from that day is that he loved me no matter what. And he helped me to see that everybody makes mistakes, and that all was not lost, that my life wasn't over, that I wasn't going to be labeled a bad person all my life. I didn't have to dwell on it, that it was wrong. And I realized that, and we did what we needed to do, which was tell our parents and move on. And so the second thing I learned is that I could learn and grow from my experiences, which you all are learning. And that stuck with me for many years. And my dad taught me a lot of lessons as I was growing up. And it always seemed to me in such a loving way that as I learned about who God was in my upbringing, I always associated it. If my dad loves me that much and no one loves me more than God, how big that love must be. And now, as a grown woman, I'm learning more about that voice I've always had that's actually inside of me, the Imago Dei, the God within me. And I just think it's awesome. So I'm going to leave you all with a poem that one of my favorite poets, Shel Silverstein, wrote, and it's called The Voice. And he's talking about that voice in us. So listen carefully, because afterwards, I want you to think about how that voice inside of you might have talked recently, maybe even this morning. Maybe something happened between you and one of your siblings, or even your mom or dad or you. But just think about that voice, and then you can draw a picture of what that kind of looked like to you or felt like, and it just helps. So here it goes. The voice, or you can write about it if you can write. That's what I did about this. I wrote it down. It really helped me. The Voice by Shel Silverstein. There is a voice inside of you that whispers all day long. I feel that this is right for me. I know that this is wrong. No teacher, no preacher, no parent or friend or wise man can decide what's right for you. You just listen to that voice that speaks inside. So thank you for letting me share the sermon with you today. I hope all of y'all have a wonderful day and listen to that voice. God bless.
I love that. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about anger today. So I think many of us are afraid of our anger because we weren't allowed to express it as children. We were punished for it or labeled troublemakers or brats or fit throwers. So as adults, I think our instinct is to shut down those feelings in ourselves and suppress and deny, and because we're ashamed of it, or we rush through those feelings as quickly as we can because it feels so wrong. But I think that if our anger goes unevaluated and unprocessed and rushed, if our anger isn't given the floor, then it doesn't just go away. I think if we can't just decide to be angry, and I think that it just comes out sideways, and that's when we hurt people and we hurt ourselves. So what I want to propose to you all today is to be angry and stay mad a while and hold it and don't interrupt it, because I think it's speaking. So see what it has to teach you. So why am I mad? To paraphrase Glennon Doyle, she says, I cry a lot because I'm paying attention. Well, I think I'm angry a lot because I'm paying attention. And I used to think that I was quick to anger because I was sinful and spiritually immature. But now I know that my tantrums as a kid were likely because of the abuse that I endured and kept secret. And now I realize that my rants about the state of the world that sit here ready to erupt like an active volcano every time I read the news, because I know that these horrible things are happening and destroying lives. And so I'm paying attention. And there are times when I use my anger to suppress my other emotions. There are times that I've hurt people with my anger, and I'm in therapy and I'm doing my best. So if you are a fiery person, if you're passionate and if you're loud, you may not be for everyone, and that's okay. A wise woman, Fran Pratt, once said, I am not intimidating, you are intimidated. And I love that. And so what I want to say to my younger self and my current self and your younger selves and your current selves, don't shriek to make others comfortable. Don't hide your anger just because you don't want to upset people. And I hope that you can find people who can welcome your big feelings and aren't afraid of them. And as I reparent myself and as I'm healing, I remind myself that anger is not necessarily the opposite of peace. We can hold it and we can make space for it and we can learn from it if we listen to it. So in summation, what I want to say to little Becca is your anger is valid. The things that happened to you were real and they sucked. The people who should have protected you didn't, and they failed you. And the world is beautiful, and it is also a terrifying shit show, and we all deserve better. Your rage is understandable, and your anger doesn't upset God because God's pretty familiar with anger. And of course, find a way to turn your anger into something good. But for now, it's okay to just feel it. So let's participate in the liturgy together. I will read the regular font, and you can join me in reading the bold. God is within you.
God is also within you.
Lift up your hearts.
We join in the beloved community.
Let us give thanks for the blessing of life.
Together we raise our voices in gratitude.
Okay. I invite you to take your elements now as I pray. God, help us to embrace and listen to our anger so that way we may better advocate for ourselves and for others. Great is the mystery of faith.
Christ has reimagined death, and we join him in bringing heaven to earth. Good morning, everybody. I'm so sorry I have my camera off because we're having bandwidth issues out here outside the city. I wanted to read a poem for us this morning. You know, we're in this series of giving messages and words, wisdom to our younger self. And when I came across these words from Mary Oliver, I thought she was doing the same, whether it's wisdom to her younger self or wisdom to younger dear ones. So it's a bit of a lengthy poem. I've been told by somebody I'm married to and somebody I work with, also two different people. So it's long, I know. I'll go by it quickly, but listen and bask in it and see what phrase or word stands out to you from Mary Oliver's wisdom. Here she writes, number 1, will the hungry ox stand in the field and not eat of the sweet grass? Will the owl bite off its own wings? Will the lark forget to lift its body in the air or forget to sing? Will the rivers run upstream? Behold, I say, behold the reliability and the finery and the teachings of this gritty earth gift. Number 2, comfort, drink water and understand delight. Visit the garden where the scarlet trumpets are opening their bodies for the hummingbirds who are drinking the sweetness, who are thrillingly gluttonous. For one thing leads to another. Soon you will notice how stones shine underfoot. Eventually, tides will be the only calendar you believe in. And someone's face, whom you love, will be as a star, both intimate and ultimate, and you will be both heart shaken and respectful. And you will hear the air itself like a beloved whisper, oh, let me, for a while longer, enter the two beautiful bodies of your lungs. Number 3, the witchery of living is my whole conversation with you, my darlings. All I can tell you is what I know. Look and look again. This world is not just a little thrill for the eyes. It's more than bones. It's more than the delicate wrist with its personal pulse. It's more than the beating of the single heart. It's praising. It's giving until the giving feels like receiving. You have a life. Just imagine that. You have this day and maybe another and maybe still another. Number 4, someday I'm going to ask my friend Paulus, the dancer, the potter, to make me a begging bowl, which I believe my soul needs. And if I come to you to the door of your comfortable house with unwashed clothes and unclean fingernails, will you put something into it? I would like to take this chance. I would like to give you this chance. Number 5, we do one thing or another. We stay the same or we change. Congratulations if you've changed. Number 6, let me ask you this. Do you also think that beauty exists for some fabulous reason? And if you have not been enchanted by this adventure, your life, what would do for you? Number 7, what I loved in the beginning, I think, was mostly myself. Never mind that I had to, since somebody had to. That was many years ago. Since then, I have gone out from my confinements, though with difficulty. I mean the ones that thought to rule my heart. I cast them out. I put them on the mush pile. They will be nourishment somehow. Everything is nourishment somehow or another. And I have become the child of the clouds and of hope. I have become the friend of the enemy, whoever that is. I have become older, and cherishing what I have learned, I have become younger. And what do I risk to tell you this, which is all I know? Love yourself, then forget it, then love the world. Amen.
Thanks, Matt. It actually worked out that you didn't have your camera on, because I think we needed to visually see that poem. And as I was reading it, I was trying to remember, like, I've engaged with this poem before. And very fun fact, actually, it was with that person that Matt referenced that he's married to. I have a habit of tricking my friends into rituals, and I have a memory of several years ago on Heather's birthday. We had like a hike and a communion moment, and I read a chunk of that poem. And I'm sharing that with you to say, go outside and go on a hike and bring a little bit of food and read some poetry while you're there and call it communion and call it prayer, and expand your view of what it means to be in divine presence. And so thank you, Matt, for sharing that with us. And now I want to show you another form of poetry. It's called a very long reading from the book of John. It's for our sermon text today, and I don't have the words to put on the screen. I'm so sorry. So I will try to read them in a way that you can ingest easily. This is from John. It's chapter 9, verses 13 through 40. They took the one who had been born blind to the Pharisees. It had been on a Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud paste and opened this one's eyes. The Pharisees asked how the individual could see. They were told, Jesus put mud on my eyes. I washed it off, and now I can see. This prompted some Pharisees to say, this Jesus cannot be from God because he doesn't keep the Sabbath. Others argued, but how could a sinner perform signs like these? They were sharply divided. Then they addressed the blind person again. Since it was your eyes he opened, what do you have to say about this Jesus? He's a prophet, came the reply. The temple authorities refused to believe that this one had been blind and had begun to see until they summoned the parents. Is this your child? They asked. And if so, do you attest that your child was blind at birth? How do you account for the fact that your child can see? The parents answered, we know this is our child, blind from birth. But how our child can see now, or who opened those blind eyes, we have no idea. But don't ask us. Our child is old enough to speak without us. The parents answered this way because they were afraid of the temple authorities, who had already agreed among themselves that anyone who acknowledged Jesus as Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That was why they said, our child is of age and should be asked directly. A second time, they summoned the one who had been born blind, and they said, give God the glory instead. We know that this Jesus is a sinner. I don't know whether he's a sinner or not, the individual answered. All I know is that I used to be blind, and now I see. They persisted. Just what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? I already told you, but you won't listen to me, came the answer. Why do you want to hear it all over again? Don't tell me you want to become disciples of Jesus too. They retorted scornfully, you're the one who is Jesus' disciple. We're disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we have no idea where this Jesus comes from. The other retorted, well, this is news. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't hear sinners, but that if people are devout and obey God's will, God listens to them. It is unheard of that anyone ever gave sight to a person blind from birth. If this one were not from God, he could never have done such a thing. What? They exclaimed. You're steeped in sin from birth, and you're giving us lectures? With that, they threw the person out. When Jesus heard of the expulsion, he sought out the healed one and asked, do you believe in the chosen one? The other answered, who is this one that I may believe? You're looking at him, Jesus replied. The chosen one is speaking to you now. The healed one said, yes, I believe, and worshiped Jesus. And Jesus said, I came into this world to execute justice, to make the sightless see and the seeing blind. Some of the Pharisees who were nearby heard this and said, you're not calling us blind, are you? We hear the voice of God in these words.
Thank you, Aurelia, for reading that passage, and thanks be to God. So, in preparation for today's sermon, I thought long and hard about what would I say to my younger self. And I really struggled because there's actually a lot, like a lot, that I would say to my younger self if given the chance. It seems I'm not the only one that thinks about these things. If you do a Google search today, message to your younger self, you will get no less than 116 million search results. I posed the question on Facebook last night to friends. If you could say one thing to your younger self, what would it be? And if we're connected in that way, go read some of the responses. Many of them are really made me think and reflect, and some were kind of funny. And they ranged from things like, get therapy now, get healing now. Don't wait to deal with the emotional pain and baggage of your childhood and of your youth, to things like tipping off the younger you with the right Powerball numbers, or investing in a young company called Amazon. The message that I would say to my younger self, probably among many, is it's not your fault. It's not your fault. In the Bible passage that Aurelia read just a few minutes ago, we learn that Jesus has healed a person who was born with blindness and without sight. The verses at the beginning of John 9, which were before the passage Aurelia read this morning, Jesus is walking along, and the scripture says that he saw a person who was blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him." First of all, it's kind of icky, the fact that the disciples seem to be speaking about the man who was blind within earshot of the man who was blind. It's a bit awkward. It's the first indication in the passage that the religious devotees in Jesus's life often objectified others instead of seeing them as deserving dignity, as those who were made in God's image, instead of engaging them with God's love and radical grace. This can be added, by the way, to a very long list of things not to say in front of a person with different abilities. Why do they have that ability? Did they sin, or was it their parents? When confronted with the question, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him." Notice that Jesus does not ascribe blame and the shame that comes with it concerning the man's condition. Jesus stops short, too, of attributing the condition to the work or will of God. He simply says that the man was born with his condition so that God's glory might be revealed. This might sound a little strange to us, but context, like everything in Scripture, is extremely important here. In the preceding chapter, John 8, we learn that Jesus is teaching and healing at the temple in Jerusalem. In the chapter before that, we learn that the reason he was in Jerusalem was for Sukkot, or the festival of booths. The temple as a structure was opulent, to say the least. Much of the structure was plated in gold or bronze. The scale of the structure would have been impressive and imposing on the Jerusalem landscape. The way the structure was designed was intended to bring glory to God, and all the activities and festivals in that massive complex were to point toward the glory and the work of God. The temple was designed in such a way that only people who were male and who were deemed worthy by hereditary status could approach the inner parts of the structure. It was believed that God resided in that inner part of the temple, often called the Holy of Holies, an interior room that was literally covered in gold. The walls, the furnishings, all of it gold-plated. The high priest was allowed to enter once a year on the Day of Atonement to make sacrifice for the sins of the people, and it was believed that God's glory was present in the room, believed that God's work in the world happened at the temple and as a result of the cultic temple worship. And standing right in the courtyard of the temple, Jesus states that the person without sight was born that way so that God's work might be revealed. God's good work, not revealed through animal sacrifice, not revealed through opulent buildings, not revealed through male priests, but revealed through the visually impaired beggar who the temple and all of its priests and visitors were largely blind to. I wonder if the unsighted man who Jesus encounters ever thought about his condition. Well, of course he did. But I wonder if he ever shamed himself or lived with guilt. The disciples clearly thought that unless he or his parents were guilty of some sin, the man would have probably been born with the ability to see. Jesus, in essence, confirms to the man, before healing him anyway, it's not your fault. The time that Jesus was at the temple was one of the high holy times of the Jewish year. That festival I mentioned a minute ago, known as Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Booths, was a weeks long Thanksgiving and harvest celebration in October. Jesus heals a man with visual impairment on the Sabbath, and then the real irony of the passage kicks in. The religious leaders leading a nationwide Thanksgiving celebration full of weeks of religious ritual and praising God for blessing and provision in the wilderness after the Exodus are indignant that a person born with blindness is healed on the Sabbath by a rabbi named Jesus. Surely we are not blind, are we? Or in the passage, the version of Scripture, the translation that Aurelia read, you're not calling us blind, are you? This question asked by the Pharisees at the end of the passage is key to understanding the narrative. Sometimes I have struggled with what I would say is guilt instilled from my own upbringing, my own lived experiences as a child, as an adolescent. And Jesus, in responding to this initial question of the disciples, essentially tells the person who is blind, it is not your fault. In fact, he takes it further. In the temple complex, on a holy day, in the middle of a high holy festival, Jesus tells the man, God's work is revealed just as much in you as it is in this building and all of its trappings and rituals. Those must have been such powerful words. It's not your fault. God's good work and even God's glory is being revealed in you. I think that's the message I would tell my younger self. It's not your fault you were raised in such a conservative home, and it's really not your parents' fault either, because they were doing the very best that they could. It's not your fault that your parents got divorced. For a brief window of time in my young adolescence, I actually blamed myself for that, which is really natural for kids that experience that in their households. It's not your fault that you came later in life to a more expansive and grace-filled way of viewing God and viewing yourself. It's not your fault you were bullied in middle school. It's not your fault that you've struggled with depression and anxiety much of your life. It's not your fault that you only realized you've been living with ADHD for a really long time at the age of 39, about a month before your 40th birthday. It's not your fault you've been wounded by the various religious systems that raised you and that you've given your entire adult life to serving. It's not your fault, is largely what I would tell my younger self. And in the passage, even after the blind man finds healing, he is interrogated by religious leaders. His parents don't defend him, and he's kicked out of the synagogue. I bet all of that came with some trauma too. How terrible is it that after people find healing, that religious systems traumatize them for it? The man who could now see was suddenly rejected by his own religious system and even by his family system. But that wasn't his fault either, any more than being blind was his fault. In verse 40, the Pharisees asked Jesus that question. Surely we're not blind, are we? You're not saying we're blind, Jesus. In verse 41, which Aurelia didn't read, but I saved for the sermon, Jesus says to them, if you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, we see, your sin remains. This brings up an interesting consideration. Jesus essentially says to the Pharisees, when you didn't know what you didn't know, you were not at fault. But now that you do know better, you're responsible for your new knowledge, you're responsible for your new understanding, and you're responsible for what you do with that new knowledge and that new understanding. I think this is instructive for all of us. I take it that way personally. I could beat up my younger self. And I have actually, about the number of years I didn't think that women could be pastors. Or I could beat up my younger self about the length of time it took me to come to the conviction that God's welcome and inclusion fully includes LGBTQ siblings. I didn't know what I didn't know, though. But now that I do know, I'm responsible and accountable before God to do better and to do different. Perhaps when Jesus said, it's not your fault, it was the first time the man without sight had ever heard these words. And until the Pharisees knew better, it wasn't their fault either. Think about the boy Samuel in the Old Testament, who was raised from the age of a child to be a priest at the temple. Jesus gives sight to the man who was born blind. This is the miracle of the gospel. The famous song by the slave trader John Newton reminds us of this when Newton wrote, I once was lost, but now I found, was blind, but now I see. A reference to this passage in John, no doubt. And in today's passage, we might identify with the person who was indeed blind from birth. I think of a lot of ways I was blind from birth, figuratively. Or we might identify with the disciples who unknowingly ask unhelpful or hurtful questions. Maybe they should have known better, but they clearly didn't. Or we might even identify with those who are so caught up in religious tradition and ritual that we cannot sometimes see God's clear work, even in our very midst. In any case, there's a good chance it's not your fault, because we are all products of the systems that birthed us and raised us and nurtured us. But that's what grace is all about. The declaration to my younger self, it's not your fault, is not only spoken over me by Jesus already, but when I say it to myself as an affirmation, I am giving myself the grace that God has already given me, the healing that God has already given me. And so, my prayer for each of us this week is that whatever our trauma, whatever our pain, whatever our spiritual or mental or physical condition is, that we can hear the words of grace speaking love and healing over us. And I pray that we might be able to speak those words over ourselves. Amen.
Maybe I need more time to heal. Try to unpack things I feel. Battles I've lost, wars I've won, and all of the hurt that has been done. Maybe I need more time to heal. Maybe I need just a little more space. Distance myself from the troubles I face. What would it hurt to just lay low? Maybe I need more time to grow. And maybe prayer's just letting go. All I want is for this setting sun to show me how it's done, to show me how far I've come. All I know is life's not what it seems. Yeah, it's much more illusory. There's ground and more uncertainty. Maybe I need more time to heal. Try to unwrap all the worst I feel. Words I've been hearing myself say. Stories I tell myself each day. Maybe just let them slip away. All I want is for this setting sun to show me how it's done, to show me how far I've come. All I know is life's not what it seems. Yeah, it's much more illusory. There's ground and more uncertainty. Maybe all I want is for this setting sun to show me how it's done, show me how far I've come. All I know is life's not what it seems. It's much more illusory. There's ground and more uncertainty. Maybe
Hello, I'm Clark, and I'm going to read the benediction. I'll read the lighter print and join reading with me in the bold. Lord, you are ascending God. You sent your word to create. You sent Christ to reveal. You sent your spirit to empower. You sent your church to proclaim. Send us,
Send
O
us,
God,
O God,
to
to
renew
renew
the
the
earth,
earth.
led
Lead us
by
by your Spirit
by
in
your
your
spirit and your word.
As your
As your
people,
people, we now go.
You know,
By our love, will
we are
make
By
you
our
known.
love will make you known.
People of God, you are sent. Go in peace for peace. Amen.
thanks everyone, and we'll see you in person and online next Sunday. Y'all have a good rest of your day.